All right. Welcome everybody to Great Education Colorado Advocates Network. In the chat, if you could please share your name, your personal pronouns, what city you're zooming in from, and your organization or school. My example there is at the bottom, Ben Robinson, he, him, Denver, Great Education, Colorado. Great Education Colorado's vision is through public education, every Colorado student, regardless of their zip code, learning needs, language, identities, or the color of their skin, graduates prepared to lead their best life. And accompanying that mission, Great Education Colorado harnesses the power of grassroots activism and diverse, inclusive networks to guarantee that public schools in every Colorado community are welcoming and adequately, equitably, and sustainably funded. All right, our goal for the Great Education Colorado Advocates Network is to create a space for us to build community and take action together. We meet the second Tuesday of every month. I will go ahead and drop that May sign up link in the chat in just a minute. Like last time, it's on our website, and you just have to scroll down about half the page to get to it. The April one is on top. We will take that one off soon. Yeah, the May link can be found there. So I'll go ahead and put that on the chat momentarily. Community commitments, move up, move back. No one knows everything, but together we know a lot. Let's learn together. We all come here with different perspectives, different things to say, different past experiences, different jobs, whatever it is. And we're all coming here to change the lives of kids and teachers across the state. And then last but and not least, presuming positive intent, but acknowledging our impact. If we do say something hurtful while we're here, or we say something that somebody doesn't disagree with, our expectation here is that we get that sorted out quickly so that we can move on and continue our discussion. So today we're going to start off with a listen question that might seem kind of weird at first, but I think it'll make a little bit more sense given the body of our conversation today. And that question is, how would you convince someone who is skeptical of public education that we need to raise more revenue for schools, right? If you recall, we just completed a poll with Magellan Strategies. And so I think this will make a bit more sense in a few minutes. But to get the wheels churning right now, we're going to go ahead and take about 12 minutes. I'm going to break us into breakout rooms because we have enough people today to do that. So we'll do that for about 7-8 minutes, and then we will come back and share our thoughts. I will go ahead and post this question in the breakout rooms while we're in there 2 or 3 times, just as a refresher. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing real quick so I can get everybody put into breakout rooms. All right. Well, I hope you all had a good time in your breakout rooms. We're going to come back in just for a few minutes here. We're going to share out and further discuss that question because I doubt that the answers in every single room were the same. So that question, once again, was how would you convince someone who is skeptical of public education that we need to raise more revenue for schools, right? It's kind of a tough ask, but how would you do it? So anybody who wants to go ahead and get started, that's great. We have kind of a lot of people here right now, so if you could just raise your hand, that would be awesome, either by doing this or with the little thing. I'll keep my eye out either way.
Call on somebody.
All right, Jan.
No, that's not what I meant. I said we can't argue. We can't argue with these people, but it's going to take some little educating. They're going to have to learn a little bit about the negative factor and why we are behind. A lot of people live here and still understand how Tabor works, so can't get into all of that, but we're going to have to do a little bit of educating to these people that haven't been paying attention. Maybe they don't have kids in school, so education.
Okay, that sounds like a good, sensible place to start. Bev?
One of the things I like to remind people of is that half of our school districts are on 4-day work weeks because they can't afford to pay the teachers and bus drivers and everybody to work 5 days, and we know 4 days is an equivalent to 5 days.
Okay. Ronnie?
Sorry, I always lag on pressing my unmute button. Let me put my hand down too. So I get one of the things that we were talking about is, or one of the things that I said personally is I talked about us changing the wording. You know, if someone is a skeptic and they've had children that have been through the school system, whether they have grandchildren in the school system or not, there's not going to be a whole lot of convincing that you can do. And the reason why that's true, but I would say something that should convince them are statistics. I mean, statistically speaking, the public school system here in Colorado is very low on the scale for funding throughout the nation. And so again, there's not a whole lot that you can do in terms of convincing people, but I think what you can do is state facts and let them know that, you know, not everybody can afford private education, you know, because it's a very expensive thing. You know, oftentimes I find that as a Black woman married to a Black man with 4 Black children, oftentimes that idea of our kids going to private school, it escapes us because it's not something that we can afford. So we've had to really nurture and push the idea, not just with our children, but letting other people know that, you know, we have to be available and be able to nurture our kids to understand that education is their way to something better than the lowered expectations that are put in place for children of color in public education. And hopefully that would have people understand that public education is a viable thing.
I think that's
I
great,
hope that
Ronnie.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And it's, you know, I think what you said is part like, okay, well, let's hit him with the facts. And also this is something it sounds like something that's morally, philosophically important too, you know, like that's and sorry, we just had my screen is going crazy. But I think it was is it Alicia? And then we'll go to Christy and then we'll go to Matt.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here today. I just want to popcorn off of what Ronnie just said. And it goes one step beyond even affordability and into the laws that we currently have, right? It is our right to public education. It is our right to have certain expectations of our public education system. It is our right as parents to give our children the requirements to get into greater education or further their trade or make great choices in life. This isn't a thing that only a certain status of money gives us. This is our right. And we do need education, and education of language changes because it is a different time today. And today it is a time we're all here today to say it is our right for our students and our children and our communities to require more and better. And let's not forget what we all come back to, which is the dollars. And we're not raising taxes with this ask, right? We're not raising taxes with what we're going to our voters for. We're not raising taxes to help give our children the backbone and kind of requirement as parents of their right to be just as educated as somebody who could afford a higher level of whatever's. It's all right.
I like that. Like it is a base level thing that everyone needs, right? Everyone deserves, and that we need to raise the money for. Let's go on to Christy and then we'll do Matt. And then after that, Jerry.
I think, and Matt said it just before I said it, and that is that, to educate our children, the value of that, to bring them into the economy as contributing members of the society and economy versus people requiring safety net items, the penal system, welfare, things like that. And I don't think, I think the statistics are important. I think the graphs that show how much lower our investment is in education is important, and it shocks a lot of people. And then the other thing, and I think I really felt this strongly when we were getting signatures for Initiative 63, people do want teachers to be paid better and better respected, and to help people understand that that is not possible without more money.
Gotcha. Thank you, Christy. Matt, and then Jerry.
Yeah, I mean, we basically said the same thing at the same time in our group, but I just wanted to kind of point everybody back to people that are skeptical of the public education. So I think that's a really good way. It's either you pay for it now or you pay for it more later. I think that's a really good argument for people that, and I agree with the previous people saying you aren't really going to convince minds. I mean, the way we're divided as a society, but you can go to the pocketbook and say, would you rather pay a little bit now, or would you pay a lot more later when somebody's homeless or incarcerated or something like that?
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Jerry.
The other thing we talked about is public education is for everyone. It does not matter what your student's ability is, what challenges they have. Public education is there for them. But if we don't have the appropriate funding, we can't provide the services that every child needs. And we did talk a lot about private school, and private schools can say, no, we don't want this child. We don't have to follow an IEP. There's no requirements, but a public school does. And they are required to do it, but can they do an adequate job without the adequate funding? And the fact that Colorado is one of I mean, I assume we'll talk about the BS factor in a little while. Even with the BS factor at 0, we're still 30 years behind in funding. So, compared to the rest of the country, we are way down at the bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. And point well taken. I think that, one of the threads we're getting here is that, like, this is a public resource that everyone needs. And I think that's good framing. I think that a lot of times when we're while talking past each other, we don't capitalize on that. And there are a lot of people on the right or who believe fundamentally different things than the people in this group do, at least, who have benefited greatly from public education. And I think those people need a reminder of that too. While they're sitting there and opposing what we're trying to do for our kids, for the teachers, for the people who work in our schools. Others before we move on. Great. Christy put in the chat a little something about vouchers too, which we have been talking about quite a bit lately. So especially with a certain constitutional measure floating around. So we will talk about that a little bit more lately. But one last pass. Does anybody else have anything to say before we move on to the next part of our discussion? All right. Thank you so much for your contributions. I thought this was great. Our questions are usually not, I guess, this hypothetical. So maybe something to do more of in the future. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So we just talked about how we might persuade somebody who is maybe not anti-public education, but at least isn't jazzed about the idea of us getting more revenue, raising more taxes, however you want to put it, right? So one thing that Great Ed decided that we were going to do in the past couple months was to get some data of our own about the fiscal landscape of Colorado, about how people feel about funding public education. Now, we've done this before through campaigns, but they haven't exactly been our polls. And we wanted to be able to ask questions that we wanted to ask and that we thought would help us move the ball along at the Capitol, at the ballot eventually. So we want to go over some of that with y'all today. We think it's pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff to go over. We're not going to get to it all right now, but we're going to get to some of the cool top line stuff. And Lisa and I will sort of tag team this. But let's go ahead and get started off with why we polled, why we decided to poll. Just kind of went over some of this. But first point I just talked about, this is really the first poll we've done for our organization. And to inform our work, hopefully for years to come. And so, you know, the timing here is important too. We have an adequacy study coming up, which is going to be the second part of our discussion today. Property and income tax discussions, read potential cuts, and then also forthcoming elections in the fall. All right. And some of the top line polling takeaways, 63% think additional funding would result in better education. That's something that's been reflected across other polls in the past. If you are not muted, I would ask you to mute, please. So 63% think additional funding would be a better for education, would result in better public education. 80% agree that schools will be fully funded when districts are able to attract and retain qualified teachers and staff. And that's another big theme that we've been seeing over the years, but that's also a pretty staggering number there, 80%, right? A couple more polling takeaways is that 64% of voters would vote yes on an Initiative 63 style ballot measure. I'm going to let Lisa talk about that a little bit more in a minute, so we can give a refresher to some people, explain it to some people who may not know. And then that 72% of voters would be likely to vote for such a measure if that revenue went to teacher pay. So in other words, that number goes up if we're talking about teachers, right? Lisa, I will turn it over to you for a second so you can sort of explain more about what this Initiative 63 style ballot measure is, the significance of the polling, what Initiative 63 was to begin with, those kinds of things.
Sure. So Initiative 63 was what we tried to put on the ballot in 2022 with a lot of you folks on the call gathering signatures. And what it was going to do was just take some of our income tax that we're already paying in, debrucing it so it doesn't go into the Tabor calculation, the Tabor limit, and putting it into the state education fund. And we worked with Magellan Strategies, as Ben pointed out, who asked the same question 2 years ago so that we can kind of compare what's happening. And I do want to say just a little bit more background on this poll. This is the raw data that we've gotten. We don't know. We are going to get a report from, so you guys are really getting the first sneak peek. We'll get some slides from our pollster who will do a deeper dive into who is saying what, what they call the crosstabs, what our base is, what's most moving to our base of supporters, what's most moving to the sort of people in the middle. So we will be getting more information out of this and being able to compare a little bit better the polling that we just did last week and 2 years ago. But we are not thinking that the legislature is going to put Initiative 63 on the ballot. The deadlines to put something through a citizens initiative are gone, but we just want to have a little bit more data about what people think about the surpluses, especially now that there's 2 years of people getting large checks. How has that changed it? And it is heartening to see that 63% still say that they would vote for this measure. We dug a little bit deeper about sort of saying this would take money from your surplus, and it shaved off a few points. And so I think one of the baselines that we have, one of the takeaways, is that whatever we're going to do is going to take a lot of narrative shifting, and it's going to take a lot of grassroots advocates talking to people to get folks to understand all the things that were talked about, Jerry and Christy and Alicia, to understand the importance. So we have a good basis. People do know that we need more funding for schools at the moment, and this is where we need to learn more about what's underneath and who is saying it, but there's not as much trust for school districts as there used to be. Some of that is coming from the left, some of it's coming from the right, so we have to make sure that we're very careful in how we see this. But people still do believe that education is really important. We did some polling on Tabor, and this is a number that is not going to make anybody on this call happy, but it's not a surprise that we had 50% say they view Tabor favorably. And the number of people who say they don't know anything about Tabor has plummeted because of surplus checks.
Oh, Lisa, you're breaking up there.
Of John Caldera and I'm sorry, I am driving through the street. I am not driving. Importantly, so we have a lot of work to do. We'll talk a little bit later about the polling we did on the potential constitutional amendment on school choice. And the bad news is it's popular to start with. The good news is we can take it down, because when people actually hear about what it would do, they don't like it. But our work is cut out for us, which is why we are working to really build that network of networks and make sure that we are all rowing together and have messaging and are connected in all our communities, geographic, demographic, to be getting across the messages that of the importance of public education and doing that together. As time goes on, we will be doing more briefings about, when you're talking to folks who are, of different kinds of folks, what are the things that really move them and become more sticky and visceral for folks. We will have some of that information to help out with the messaging. So that's the bottom line. People know we need more funding for schools. People want to make sure that every student has access to all the coursework and opportunities they need for career and college. That's a very positive thing. It's just that putting it all together, and when we have to ask the voters about a specific thing, we know that we need to be building this movement now and continuing to get people engaged and have the right messaging to be able to succeed, which we have to do. That was a little bit beyond what you asked me to do, Ben. But
it's all good. I was just going to add that that teacher salaries is a thread, really prominent thread throughout this entire thing. So low teacher salaries were the -- reason that people thought schools, that public education was not fully funded. And then separate question. So if more school funding were approved, which of the following needs would be your school district's top funding priority? And teacher pay was number one. So not lost on anybody looking at the poll that is sort of concern number one for people. It's something that we gleaned a couple years ago when we first thought about running Initiative 63. But just wanted to put that out there. And then also that there is broad support for increased funding, and broad recognition of our funding shortcomings. Both of those things are captured in the survey. Let's see, we got something in the chat. Oops. Sorry. Is there more information on the number and demographics of those who participated in the poll? Pardon this question if the information was already made available. Lisa?
There will be, I mean, we do have, it was intended to reflect the voting population, not, and this wasn't actually, this wasn't intended to be likely voters only. We really wanted to have a broad array of people who are registered to vote, but not necessarily likely. It was about 50% independents, and then about, I think, 26 Republican, or it was then pretty close Democrat and Republican. I'm not remembering all the numbers, Lori. It's absolutely critical to know all of this, and that's why we're waiting. We'll be able to go more in depth when our pollster goes through the crosstabs to see who responded how to what. But the process that Magellan uses is to make sure that at the end of all the surveys, they have got a population that pretty much reflects the voter file, and we'll find it that they'll be able to tell us how far from that they are. But majority don't have kids in school, which reflects reality. It may have been a little light, as I recall, on older voters, and that's something that we're going to need to make sure we take into account. But I know that's part of David Flaherty's process, so we'll be able to get better information to you after that.
And then Alicia says in the chat, what about the failing safety of our facilities? Let's provide safe spaces for our children to learn. So yeah, I mean, that's another huge thing. Like, we are massively behind, I think 15 billion behind in capital construction or something like that. I don't know if we had any questions specifically on the safety of school facilities. But that is obviously something that, you know, we would like to consider as an organization that cares, you know, primarily about the equitable, adequate, and sustainable funding of public schools.
I am pretty sure that was one of the ones that we put in a list of what's the most important thing, and people were able to rank them. So
Okay.
there will be a lot more detail about those, and the next time we will have more information. Sorry, it's very bumpy.
So I mean, for example,
we'll have,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
No, go ahead, Ben.
Alicia, that when I was talking about teachers a few minutes ago, and that, so teacher pay being ranked the highest in that order, I think there were 7 or 8 choices there as well. So that was definitely not the only one. And there are a handful of questions like that asked the respondents to rank by order of importance what they would fund, or what they think what thought was needed in districts.
I think further educating for the requirements of this funding that we need, I think in further educating to say that our school are not up to safety standards doesn't begin to have schools today that don't have the proper fire suppression or the proper fire alarm systems in their buildings, or generators or HVAC systems. And we don't even want to get on air conditionings, right? To say that the basic safety standards of elevators and our building life safety systems are not being addressed whatsoever in this financial crisis. And we're back to where we were at the beginning in mid-80s of having to literally save lead in our pencil. You know what I mean? Like the way we are holding these buildings together by a hope and a prayer, it shouldn't exist in 2024. Our students deserve to be in a safe space first and foremost. Maybe we can educate them a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Lisa, why don't we talk more about that? Because that's obviously, I mean, that's something that has to do with equity, sustainability, adequacy, all of our sort of core tenets. Ronnie and then Christy. Oops. It looks like Ronnie may have gone away from the camera for a minute. So Christy, if you want to go, and then Ronnie, when Christy's done, if you can hear me, we will have you go.
I guess what that brought to my mind though is that, people don't understand the difference between operational funds and bond issues. And I'd be interested to hear what percentage of bond issues are passing these days. I know that usually in Gunnison, our bond issues have passed pretty handily, although the last one, which they definitely scoped it down, barely passed. So I'm wondering if that's another area that we're losing ground on through the bond process.
Yeah, it could very well be. That's a really interesting question. Lisa, it looks like you're trying to talk.
No, I think one of the things that we'll find from this poll, and it's not going to answer everything, is what other work we need to look into. The Colorado School Finance Project would absolutely have the answer to that. Who's passing bonds, who passes bonds but not operating, and vice versa. I know we did put school safety into this one for ranking, but I don't know that it'll get into that depth. And before Jerry, you say that you talk, I wanted to go back to something that you said. We did a couple of questions that really look at how people perceive schools, what's more important, the ability of parents to choose where their student can go to, should go, versus exactly what you said earlier, Jerry, that education is a public good, that we all do well when our students succeed. And we have the edge there. And we have a slighter edge in the question of schools should focus on reading, writing, and the basics, versus schools should be a place that are welcoming, where students feel welcome, safe, secure, and academically challenged. We have an edge there, but not by a whole lot. And so we'll be looking at who are the people who are in the middle there. Who do we need to be really focusing in on to get to those, to that. Ronnie, you were up before, and then Jerry.
Okay, I heard some of what you guys were talking about. I had to go deal with my daughter. She trying to go outside and go do her thing, and I was like, you can't do that. Anyway, so I guess kind of what I wanted to talk about, we oftentimes we tend to talk about welcoming schools and welcoming environments and things of that nature. I think we also need to look at, as I've said several times before in different meetings, is we really need to look at what it looks like to get teachers in schools that look like our students in the public school system. We talk about paying folks more, that's great. But when are we going to put in the hard work that it takes to make sure, sorry, y'all, to make sure that we're hiring Black and brown teachers? I mean, just for me, just looking at the history of not just Colorado public schools, but public schools as a whole, after desegregation happened, what they did is they put things in place where it made it more challenging or harder for Black and brown folks to get hired in teaching positions, even though they were just as experienced and just as educated. And so we have to look at those things as well. I believe in teachers being paid properly so they can live just like anybody else. But we have to talk about some of these elephants in the room. And some of these elephants in the room are the fact that, we talk about teacher pay, but Where are we sacrificing to make sure that we're getting Black and brown teachers in the school? Where are we sacrificing to make sure that we're educating parents about what's possible for their children in schools? Because we can say all day long that if your child goes to school with their white counterpart, that they're going to get access to the same education. And that's not necessarily true, whether you have proper funding or not. Because I can tell you, my youngest child has special needs, and they supposedly get more money, but we're still lacking in her getting all the services that she needs. You know, and that's a basic thing in terms of the law. And so there are so many other minute details involved in making sure that schools are properly funded. And when we do get the funds for school, it has to be equitable across the board in funding schools, not give more to this school and give less to this school because of the zip code or neighborhood they live in.
Which happen to be where the buildings have air conditioning and their suppression systems work, by the way. We're just going to throw that out there since we're being real about it all, right? The buildings in the gray area codes have no issues with that and never have a hot day in their life, or we're going to call an early day, where the predominantly black and brown schools have no safety regards whatsoever. These are the oldest buildings in the state. These are the most antiquated systems in the state. We have elevators still from the early 1900s running in our buildings with our students, with our ADA students, right? Let's not even throw that out into the mix. But some basic requirements like fire suppression, how is that a conversation in 2024? But here we are.
Thank you for Alicia and Ronnie for that grounding that we have to always keep in mind, that we can't, adequate funding is not enough, equitable funding. And that's actually, we'll get to this idea of equity in talking about the adequacy study that is coming down the pike, because that's exactly what it's attempting to do, is to look at what students need and find out what services we need to make sure that every student can succeed. And I do want to call out that we don't specifically talk about the racism in how, when we're talking about equity for special needs and at risk and English language learning, we're not always getting at the issues of race and the racism that is happening in our schools. And as Ronnie's talking about, the lack of teachers who reflect the demographics of their students. And so I appreciate and hope that you will always that those issues always come up in our conversations, because that is just so fundamental to how we are not yet meeting the needs of all students. So thank you. Jerry.
You know, I've been listening about, buildings and the truth with that. And it is so complicated in this state, because I'll have people say, I don't understand that marijuana money is going to schools. And yeah, it's going to capital construction. So I've been to districts down in the San Luis Valley that have gorgeous buildings and they can't fill them. They're empty. Not that they're empty with kids, but they can't get any teachers because they had the money because of marijuana money to build a building, but then they can't fund it because they don't have the state money to provide those resources. The other thing, and we're talking about equity, yeah, our schools today are more segregated than they were before 1960. And that's not for it's because of housing and the inequity there. And then you get into the whole complication of property tax versus state tax. So when we're talking about funding, I don't have an answer, but it's somehow we've got to educate people that it's not just per pupil funding. There's a lot more to it. And then there's federal funding, which is special ed, which has never been funded fully. So I'm throwing a lot more things in the pot, but it's all part of this complicated formula that we're not the only state, but we're a mess.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. And I think we have, Sarah, I just want to time check real quick. We do have 9 minutes left. We have something that I think our last topic of discussion today, I think it's not going to solve for everything, but hopefully it's going to this adequacy study that we've been talking about. It's a lot of things that everyone was just saying, I think, and hopefully it's going to give us an idea of what districts need in order to provide a more equitable education for students, so that we can get the money we need, but we can also direct it. And this is sort of a theme I think that we've been talking about. We can also direct it in a way that or in ways that make the most sense. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, and we're going to go ahead and embark on this last little bit of our journey today. All right. So we are about to do this thing in the state of Colorado called an adequacy study. And it's something that we as a state have never done. Lots of other states have done it. Lots of other states that provide equitable, adequate, and sustainable funding to their public schools. And it's one big reason, apart from our absolutely mangled tax structure, that we have not been able to do this. But this may be, the first step in solving the next big step maybe in solving this huge intractable problem of inequitable, inadequate, and not sustainable funding. So what is it exactly? So basically it's to identify the level of base funding in Colorado, the appropriate level of base funding in Colorado, makes adjustments for, and sorry, I'm reading off the bottom here, not the top, adjustments for student and district characteristics. So things that we do not look at right now, and I'll let Lisa get more into those in just a minute. But we're actually going to have 2 adequacy studies in the state. And part of the reason for that is that we need, these big problems, we need different angles on, right? If we're just going to do one, we might not get the whole picture. But these studies are going to be completed in calendar year 2024, and then they're going to be released in early 2025. And I'm going to go back real quick because I'll let Lisa explain off this slide just so it makes a little bit more sense. Sort of what our goals for this are, where it comes from, and then we're going to go ahead and tie this in to what we talked about before at the end of this.
So as Ben said, the state of Colorado has never done a costing out study. It's not, Christy, it's not yet public who is going to be doing the studies, but we know that of the people who have applied for each, the Department of Education will choose will make that selection, and they're all reputable vendors, and we feel confident that good actionable data will come from all of them. The goal, so this is the first time that the state of Colorado has done has commissioned these studies, and they funded it well enough that they can actually be done fully. An adequacy study has been done in Colorado, first done for the Lobato litigation, which is well over a decade ago. And the Lobato, the state was attacking that adequacy study because they were the defendants. So the adequacy study was done for the plaintiffs. So Ben, if you can show this is what was done for the Lobato lawsuit, where we argued that the state, our funding system is not just unconstitutional, but also unconscionable. But here's the basis. And these numbers are old. It's been updated a couple of times, but this is what was done over a decade ago. And what it looked at was, what is the base per pupil? And in Colorado, the base is just a number that is historic. It's just what it was in the year 2000 when we passed Amendment 23, and then increased by the amount that Amendment 23 requires. First inflation plus 1% every year, and now inflation every year. It's just a historic number. It has nothing to do with need. The base, an adequate base, is defined to be, it looks at what are the resources necessary to meet the needs of a student with no special characteristics in a district with no special characteristics. So not rural, and to get that student to meet standards. And so back when we did this the first time, when it was done for the Lobato lawsuit, it was about $2,000 per pupil below, or we fund our Colorado's base is $2,000 below what the actual base should be. And just, we're going to do this really quick because we got a lot to cover in these last minutes. Just do the next slide, Ben. You can see it's a compounding problem. So one of the things that they will look into is, what are the resources you need to make sure that a student who is at risk, at that time it was a child who was eligible for free lunch, what extra resources are necessary to help them meet the standards, to intervene in whatever they were, the deficit in the number of words that they'd heard, or if they'd had not had preschool. And so the study found that it's an additional 35% on top of an adequate base. We add 12% upon a insufficient base. And so you can see the difference just compounds, and Ben just fly through the next ones. The next is small rural. You can see how big a difference it makes. The next one is, go to the next one, that's medium rural. That's the English language learning. So 47% more is needed. We, at the time, weren't even giving any percent increase. And so that formula, our formula is not taking into account the actual needs of our districts and of our students, and it's doing that on top of a base that is too small. So this adequacy study, we know it's coming. We have 8 months to build a campaign, 9 months of getting people, and you can stop to share there, Ben. The goal is to have people start thinking about this. What is full funding? What are the resources that they're going to find are necessary in this adequacy study? We don't want people waiting to find out what's the number. How much do we need to spend? It's more about, what's the right classroom size? What's the right number of adults in a building to support the behavioral health needs and the physical health needs and the needs of special needs students or ELL teachers? What is the actual, what are the inputs that we need? And they're going to put a price to it. But really what we want to focus on is, what are those inputs that we want for every student? What are the opportunities? Like, we know that from our poll that people really think that every student, no matter where they live or who they are, should have access to all the coursework they need to go to college or get into be prepared for a career. That is not happening now. What are the resources we're going to need in order to make that happen? And that's what we're going to be engaging this network and all our partners and all our supporters in this conversation about, what would full funding look like? And we'll be able to use our polling to help us inform how we need to speak to various populations. And the second thing that we said, what we want to do is we're going to use a concrete tool to help us focus this debate and really have a concrete way to change the narrative. And what we're going to be doing is, and we're with this poll, we're working with the communications group to help us really create a set of messages to get across all of these concepts, that we will be asking legislators and legislative candidates career technical education, Christy. We're going to be asking legislators and candidates 2 questions. One is, are we fully funding our schools now? I'm not, do we need any additional funding to meet the needs of students in your district? And the second thing we're going to be asking is for a commitment that they will meet with their constituents and somebody from Great Education Colorado or an expert from the Colorado School Finance Project, but will they commit to meet with their students with their constituents to understand what the adequacy study means to their district? And so we get to have we're not going to pile this all on at the end of session when they are crazed and all kinds of things are happening. We are working on that longer term question of, do you think our schools are fully funded? And giving them the opportunity, legislators, to opportunity to hear from their constituents about whether it is fully funded or not. And then to have them nailed down to say, let's get the date when we are going to sit down with you and talk to you about what the adequacy study means to our schools. And we having that opportunity to talk to legislators, we hope to be able to broaden out, to have conversations in our communities more generally, and all of us being ambassadors to our communities to talk about it. I know we're over time. So we just have, if we can ask for, so that's coming. That's coming, and it's going to come from informed by our polling. And hopefully all of you will be our ambassadors to get these messages out so that our legislators are hearing from dozens, if not hundreds of their constituents. The last action that we have is, again, you've seen it already, and you can, we have a reel on our Facebook page that you can share, but it is the decline to sign 77, 108, and 138. And 138 is the school choice, giving a constitutional right to parents to put their student wherever they want. That right actually exists now, but once we put it in the Constitution, the next step is, okay, then the state should pay for my decision to send my child to, oh, I hadn't heard that, Evie.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that right before the meeting, Evie.
That's great news. I wonder why. Facebook, I think it's on
terrible
Instagram
news.
as well.
They
Yeah,
got
Lisa,
enough
they're on the ballot. They're on the
signatures.
ballot.
Oh, they're done.
Yeah,
they're not collecting
done.
because they're done. I thought
They're
that they had
done.
decided
They
to
turned
move
it
their
in. They got
They're
enough.
done because people didn't know how bad it was.
Bad news.
Now, I'm sorry. I was just, I had like rose-colored glasses on, and I saw it as a good that they would stop. That one's bad. It reads really well, and that's why it was easy to get signatures, because a lot of people who are good government, anti-Tabor, pro-transparency, thought it would look like a good thing, but what it's going to do is give oil and gas and wealthier and corporate interests the ability to tell voters that any tax increase is bad for jobs and any tax cut is good for the economy and good for jobs, because that's the model that they use. So that our work, again, is cut out for us. I don't know if they're collecting for 108 or 138 yet, but the 138, which is the gateway to vouchers, I just reiterate that when people read the language, it was popular. It only got to 49%, which is good. But once we tell people about what vouchers would do, and that it would allow state dollars to go to schools that discriminate on the basis of all kinds of things, we can kill that one. We can use this as an opportunity to re-inform people about vouchers. So now we're really over time. Apologies, Ben. what's left?
That's pretty much it. I think the decline to sign thing there is really important. Unfortunately, 77's on the ballot, but we will face it in its new form. So, thank you everybody so much for coming out today. I thought we had a bunch of great discussions. Lots of new faces here, which is super cool. We always really like that, and a really good turnout. So don't forget to sign up for the next Advocates Network meeting. I dropped a link in the chat. You can also go to our website under what is it? It is Resources Advocates Network, and then you'll find the sign up link there. All right. Thank you, everybody.